Hey everybody, so I thought I would do something a little bit less formal maybe this time. So in any case, I'm inside. Mostly I'm just going to be doing this off the top of my head, so we'll see how it goes. But so this week, stuff that I worked on. I did not actually write down a list. So this week I added some little tufts of grass that come up when you run around through the grass, which was surprisingly more complicated than it would seem, because first off, you have to know that you're in grass. I had a weird issue where it was like really hard to determine whether or not the player was running outside of the player class, because the player class updates its position on a fixed update and everything else happens every frame in any case. There's a fly in here, so if you see a fly buzzing around my head, then maybe you can kill this fly because it's been driving me nuts all day. So basically just a bunch of small things this week. I did some experiments that were a little bit interesting. So in addition to the grass getting kicked up when you run, I did some dust being kicked up, which I'm mostly happy with, but requires me to mark up the whole world with anywhere that I might want the dust to be, and then I need to mark up what color the dust is going to be there, because if you just use one color of dust, then it doesn't really work for all different surfaces that you might want to have. So I also had another long-standing issue, which is that in the game you can middle click in order to mark tiles on a puzzle. This helps a lot with deductive problem solving and all that. But there's a few puzzles in the game that use meta tiles, where it's a tile that's made up of like multiple tiles, and marking those would mark the sub-tile parts of it rather than marking the whole tile. So my quick fix for that was basically to just go through the whole meta tile and mark all of the tiles in there. Which isn't the prettiest thing, but there's relatively few of these puzzles in the game, and it would be a significant amount of effort to just fix this whole system just for a few puzzles in the game to look a little bit nicer, when frankly to solve them you don't really even need to use the marking particles, but I just wanted it to behave a little bit more consistently across these puzzles, basically. One of the other things I did this week is one of those kind of things that you do periodically when you're working on a game, where there's a decent amount of work that needs to happen, and if you do your job right, probably nobody notices that you did it. And that was that the way that I was doing Footstep Sounds previously was that there was a sound of footsteps that would loop, so it was just multiple footsteps, like 26 different footstep sounds, just in a loop that would loop over and over again. And then I would crossfade between the different types of surfaces, so there would be, one of these sets of 26 steps for grass, and then one for just generic, and then one for snow, and then one for wood. So this more or less worked for everything until I decided to add some metal sounds when you step on the puzzle panels. And for whatever reason, the nature of that sound didn't play very well with the crossfading. I think it's mostly because when you step on metal, you get kind of a ringing sound, and you expect to hear that ring out, even if you stepped off of the metal. So there was really only one way to fix this problem, and that was that I needed to move the entire system over to just a different setup. So I moved everything over to where now there are individual footstep sounds, and those footstep sounds just get triggered periodically. And the reason this is good is because each of those sounds can be really whatever length I want it to be. If I want it to ring out for a while, it can ring out, or if I just need it to be short, that's fine. And I never have a situation where I need to trigger a footstep sound and it's not informed by whatever surface the player is on currently. The previous setup, I would crossfade between these different sounds, and I would try to do that quickly, because if I didn't do it quickly, then you might be on the wrong sound for the surface you're on. So, say you're on wood, and then we crossfade slowly. If it took like a second, you might be off of the wood and taken several steps, and it's still playing that wood sound. Or I didn't want to have the sound instantaneously switch, because then you could end up with an abrupt cut if it were the case that you were in the middle of a footstep sound when that transition occurred. So all that gets, more or less all those problems go away with the new system, where I just trigger a footstep sound based on whatever surface you're on, and it plays that sound to completion, and whether that overlaps with the next footstep sound or not doesn't really matter or affect anything. But, so the upside is that it fixes those issues. It makes the system more robust. If I wanted to add more features to it, I could, but probably for the most part, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference other than those few footstep sounds that ring out. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about next steps. So the next steps that I need to do on the game are, I have a few edge case puzzles that I need to design that mix in different mechanics from some of the different areas. So like part of the way that I've designed the game is that I try to do the combinatorics of everything. So, if I have one mechanic in one area and another mechanic in another area, I try to come up with puzzles that will mix those two mechanics together in some way that will create something interesting. This is a bit of a challenge from a design standpoint, because it means that I can't just have I can't just have like 3 puzzle varieties. I have to have puzzle variety with 1 mixed with 2, with 1 mixed with 3, with 1 mixed with 2 and 3, with 2 mixed with 3. So everything has to end up getting separated out, and I have to explore those separately. And so there's still a few of those that haven't really been explored properly. And I don't know how many puzzles I'll get out of that, but there's a few there. And then I need to start doing the art for the last 2 major areas in the game. And there's also the ending of the game that I got to figure out. So the ending of the game has kind of been a big enigma for me for a long time. I still don't really know exactly what I want to do gameplay-wise. Like, I kind of have an idea of story-wise, in so much as the game has a story, what I kind of want to happen there. But in terms of puzzles, like, it's very difficult to do an ending to this type of game, because you want to have something that changes things up enough that it feels different from the rest of the game. But you don't want to have, you don't want to change things too much, because then it's weird. Like, I can think of like positive and negative examples of both of these. So obviously a good point of comparison here would be, how does The Witness choose to end this type of thing? And The Witness kind of just goes with a bunch of meta puzzles, and it kind of onslaughts you with that, but that doesn't work exactly great. I mean, it works in the sense of you change things up. You've got puzzles where, they look messed up. You're messing with a different aspect of it. I think a bad example of how to do an ending where you change it up is the Talus Principle. So the Talus Principle mostly just has these puzzles where you're free to stop and think about whatever and figure out the puzzle. And they kind of just put a timer on it. And I'm sure I could think of more games that did this, but this oftentimes is like a real easy way to try to up the tension and up the ante and make the ending feel more exciting or something. But I don't think it's ever fun to have a timer on you while you're solving puzzles, and that if you don't do something within a certain amount of time, you die and you have to do it over again. So I don't necessarily want to say too much about what my plan is for the ending of the game, because I'd like it to be a little bit of a surprise. I want there to be some surprises, even if you're following the development log series here. I don't want you to go into the game knowing everything. but it's whatever I do is going to be somewhat in the realm of, shaking it up and trying to do something that's different mechanically from the rest of the game, but still fits in, I think, nicely. But I just have to design those puzzles and figure out how exactly that's going to work. And that's actually quite tricky because the nature of what I'm planning on doing there is a little bit complicated. Anyway, so those are pretty much the next steps that I have to figure out. And that's not going to be easy, so it's kind of like some of the hardest stuff I've saved for last to figure out. So hopefully I can start getting some headway on these issues because they're a little bit tricky problems. I probably should sit down and seriously think about the ending before I even design any of the other puzzles, but in any case, hopefully I'll have made some progress on that by next week. And then I'll be able to come back to you and tell you a little bit about what I've done. But again, I don't want to spoil too much, so I'll keep it pretty vague. So this is a little bit more of a short video. I don't really have a topic of the week for this week. I'm just kind of updating you on the stuff that I've done with the game. But in any case, stay tuned. I might have a topic next week. I'll have to think of something. I don't really want to force the topic of discussion if it's not really something that I feel strongly about talking about. I don't want to just talk about something to have something to talk about, But at the same time, I don't want to do too many of these that are literally just, here's what I did on the game this week, because I'd rather them be something that can kind of stand on their own. With that said, if you like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can see whenever new of these get posted. It's a weird way of saying that. But in any case, leave a comment below. Let's talk about maybe some topic suggestions for next week, and I'll think about those. Wishlist Taiji on Steam. There's a link in the description where you can click that. I know they've made it impossible to find things on the YouTube pages now. It's all hidden in there. But there should be a link somewhere there that says Wishlist Taiji on Steam, and then a link, and then you can click that. And until then, I will see you next week. Have a great one, everyone. Have a good one.